Brilliant, Jay. That is recording, so I'll hand it over to you and I'll put myself on mute.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me here. I'm just going to check that this is all working. Perfect. Okay, so potentially a little bit unconventionally, let me start with a story. My husband and I traveled the world in 2019, and we actually returned right in the middle of COVID-19 in March. And one of the most beautiful places we visited for me was definitely South Africa and the Western Cape. It's an incredible city. If you've never been there, you know, beautiful mountainside on one side and then incredible coastline on the other. And we were hiking around the outskirts of Cape Town with some local hikers. We actually met through an app called Meetup. We were trying to avoid all the tourist traps. And so we met up with some locals, and it was really, really incredible experience. And they told us about the fires that had raged the area in, I think it was February 2006. And it happened, you know, over 5 days and nights. You can imagine the destruction. The fire blazed, I think it was a 50-mile trail from the outskirts of Cape Town down towards the southernmost point of Africa. And as they explained to us how much the fire destroyed, I couldn't help but feel this like incredible sadness and despair almost at so much destruction that must have caused. But as they were telling this story, one of the local hikers was sort of like looking around with this big smile on his face. I was just a bit like, I mean, this isn't the story for smiling. But he told us as he looked around that they actually found something like 70 new species of foliage in the months after that blaze. And that fire was a whole new opportunity for rare plant species to germinate and flourish. And one, I believe, even lay dormant deep underground, and they thought it was extinct. So it was really, really interesting, the contrast of, you know, how I reacted to the, you know, the damage and the devastation. And it's really easy in those circumstances to see why we might get caught up in despair in those moments, right? In those moments where we feel like everything's being kind of torn apart. But he held a story of hope and opportunity and growth. And I had this moment of realization that this story sort of illustrated perfectly the importance of our mindset during change, whether that's our personal mindset or instilling the right mindsets in our people to always be prepared for the opportunity that change ignites, regardless of what we might have to lose or leave behind. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But let me get back to the formalities of introducing myself. So yes, as Elizabeth said, I'm Jay Stone, founder of Stone Changes. And I'm really, really excited about this conversation for various reasons. I'm very passionate about project management, but I see the role of project managers as so pivotal when it comes to change. We're going to talk a bit about that, but also why change capability is pivotal for your success as well, especially as we're moving into this next stage of lots of change and uncertainty. So we're going to explore a bit about the basic psychology and principles to manage change and lead change well in ourselves and in others. And I'll share a simple tool for managing the people side of change without all of the, you know, bureaucracy, the paperwork, the crazy models. This is a really, really simple tool that you can integrate into your project plans as they exist now. So I'm an explorer of the world. I'm also a change coach and a change management practitioner and a project professional. And I work with professionals who feel lost and overwhelmed trying to navigate careers or lead teams through change. And that's all around gaining clarity and confidence and courage that they need to carve their own path through their leadership journey. So really the crux of it is I guide people and projects to drive positive change in business, and that's probably about as much as you need to remember. And I've been fascinated about change, I think, and apologies for taking a bit of a more morbid tone, but probably since the death of my mum when I was about 25 years old, and that felt like a bulldozer of change in my personal life that sort of just set my world upside down. But it was soon after that when my company went through a huge restructure that really just pulled the rug from under me. And I found myself struggling with control issues that were edging towards eating disorders, nearing burnout. And whilst I wasn't depressed, I felt pretty unfulfilled, depleted, and really, really lost. And I saw formidable and inspiring people around me who had worked loyally for this company for years and worked their butts off, sort of worn down to exhaustion. And for myself and others in the years to follow, it included role changes and changes to teams and managers. And it just felt like, you know, entire careers and lives were being derailed. And this, I think, triggered out of outrage more than anything by the impact that change had on me and those around me, an interest in understanding how we as humans experience change, whether that's personally or professionally. Now, let me know in the comments whether from a personal or professional point of view, what types of change you've experienced. And your experience doesn't have to be bad, but from whether it's a work situation or personal situation, what types of change are popping up in your head as we use the word change? If you just pop those into the comments, it would be great to see. Now, I'd experienced firsthand how change was increasing, and sometimes how powerless it made me and others feel. And it impacted people in different ways. For some, it was exhilarating, right? And others, it meant stress, identity crisis, worry, anxiety, burnout. And I think my other realization was that what had perhaps worked for my parents or grandparents or mentors was no longer relevant in the business world I'd stepped into. I'd personally graduated from university right in the middle of the last recession, and many of you will have experienced something similar or have been in the working world for some time. And I realized that there's no such thing as a 40-year stable career. So I needed to develop a different set of skills and a mindset that allowed me to quickly adapt to situations of unknowns and uncertainties. And I think many of us are finding ourselves again in that moment of realization. And whilst I really hope this never happens again, the one thing that is certain is that change itself is inevitable, and therefore so is uncertainty. And we can't fight it, we can't beat it. Believe me, I have tried. So we must instead develop the change capability, the resilience in ourselves, but not only ourselves, in our teams, to not only cope with increasing change and uncertainty, but be the drivers of positive change in order to innovate, create, or thrive. So this brings me nicely onto our first outcome of the day. Now, we're hearing it more and more. And no more than now, the rate of change in business is increasing. And that is going to be the case in our projects. And what a moment of extraordinary change and uncertainty has been over the past year. This is perhaps the single largest event in our lifetime that is global, catastrophic, and has impacted almost everyone on Earth. It is the challenge of our generation. And now more than ever, we are navigating what they're calling a VUCA environment. So highly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I have to admit, I initially got into this field in the first place to never again feel what I think a lot of us can relate to at one point or another as we grapple with our physical safety, our economic security, and the sudden changes in the daily conditions. And I, for one, vowed to never feel like that again, powerless, without choices, without control of what I felt like my life, my career, feeling burnt out and degraded. And I knew I had to find a way to make change work for me. because even without the COVID situation, right, the impact of change was very clear. My own experience had shown that. And then later as a coach and a change management practitioner and as a project manager even, I could see how change caused me and others a lot of discomfort, from, exhaustion, stress, burnout. And when I started delving into the research, what worried me was that change was cited as one of the main stresses in life. So it's one of the primary causes of work-related stress, depression, and anxiety in the UK. And in fact, my research was to get even more depressing yet for women, but I won't go too far into that right now. But maybe you're thinking, this doesn't really impact me. Now, what the research also showed is that the main factors that cause employee burnout have less to do with expectations for hard work or high performance, and more to do with how someone is managed, especially during change. They state, so Gallup's study state that managers can prevent and reverse burnout by changing the way they manage and lead their projects and people. So managers play such a pivotal role in change, not only in terms of change success, but in terms of ensuring that burnout is and these kind of really adverse negative impact, the negative impact of change doesn't affect our workforces, society. But, and here's a but, there's another spanner in the works for us managers, because managers are also more likely to experience burnout themselves. So as leaders of projects, managers, we're often squashed between the pressures from above to perform and the expectations from below to lead. And more managers, and particularly project managers, are being expected to take a change vision and make, and run with it and make that happen on the ground. And they have to do this whilst confronted with their own personal challenges around dealing with prolonged periods of uncertainty and distress, whilst also being responsible for supporting a wide cross-section of people. And as we've talked about, it's a hefty responsibility when you consider the health and well-being risks of people. Other than the health risks, though, I was seeing how change and this uncertainty and the fear that was created around it was derailing projects, right? Slowing projects down, preventing innovation, fear-based perceptions, kind of reinforcing the status quo and the way it should be, the way it's done around here sort of thinking. And there's loads of statistics that are bandied around by the change world. One of them you'll probably often see is 70% of projects fail. And actually, initially, I was that statistics doesn't hold much kind of ground in terms of its research. However, the research actually suggests that it's a modest exaggeration. And it's more around the 50% mark. Now, I'm sure these figures can be debated, it depends on the change, it depends on the projects and all sorts of things. But what I could see happening on the ground myself was how much time was lost on projects, how much resistance was creating conflicts in teams, how much bad feeling was causing mistakes. And there was a little bit of employee sabotage happening on the ground. So I could see the business risks of not managing and leading change well. And I know that this was happening on the ground because I was that resistant employee. I have taken the title, I am the resistant employee. And I was the one that was kicking up the fuss. I was absolutely experiencing a lot of these things. It's probably why I've moved into this field now. So to ensure that, especially as we're moving into increasing change, to ensure this does not impact your ability to progress or to effectively manage your projects or to be effective leaders in this new world of change and more change, I think change capability and change leadership is going to become more and more crucial for managers and leaders. And I think, as I said, project managers and people managers play the biggest role. we, I believe, are perfectly positioned to be the drivers of positive change, because the role we play means we sit in these positions of leadership of project groups or of teams with access to senior sponsors, which means we can guide them on how to manage change well on the ground, because we're also the closest to those on the ground. So we're more connected in that way. So we really, really play this pivotal role. And with change and uncertainty likely to continue in our daily lives, in our projects, in our organizations, and across the world, what my work is about is showing that change capability and change leadership is no longer appropriate in the hands of just senior teams or specialist change people, change managers, change consultants. I'm putting myself out of a job here, who simply, I think for the most part, parachute in, costing thousands, sprinkle their change pixie dust everywhere, and then leave like a dust cloud of chaos behind them. So I don't believe that that is an effective way to manage periods of change. The company doesn't benefit from building that change capability, and nor do the individuals. So my belief is that we need change leaders across all levels, competent in basic change principles, because change is constant. And so change is now every manager's job every day. And in doing so, making change resistance a thing of the past, and change resilience something that we're all competent, capable, and comfortable in. So in what would become a 7-year obsession and still going, I spoke to psychologists and neuroscientists and entrepreneurs and CEOs and change experts, and I've read loads of books in search of some answers around how can we thrive during change? What is it about change, and how can we better manage it if it's going to be a permanent part of life and only increasing? How do I beat it? I realized I couldn't beat it, for one, so apologies for that. That's not what I'll be sharing today. But in my research, what I came to realize is that any form of significant change and uncertainty in my life caused me some form of discomfort and fear, right? And sometimes it would make me respond or react, especially if it was enforced on me. It would make me react in adverse ways, right? Defensiveness, resistance, fear-based, anxiety-fueled. And I started to see that even if the change itself was overall positive, and there was a positive outcome at the end, they'd created this beautiful vision of what the world was going to be like, there was still a struggle to move beyond whatever I was experiencing, right? The fear, and kind of take those steps forward. But why? And this is where we get to our second outcome, and understanding a bit about the basic psychology and principles of change. And in understanding this in ourselves, I feel like we're better prepared to overcome these responses that we have that are sometimes completely out of our control. So I think we've all probably experienced to some degree how change and the resulting uncertainty that is created, it's an uncomfortable human experience, right? We're all experiencing an element of discomfort at the uncertainty of the world right now. And there was a rather crude study actually done years ago on animals, where they were given, some animals were given an advance warning before given a shock, whilst others were not warned at all. Those that were never warned lived in a constant state of anxiety. And what this informed us is that people experience greater stress and anxiety when they are uncertain of an outcome. Even if the outcome is negative, they prefer the negative outcome and knowing it than to not know an outcome at all. And during that period of big change in my life, I knew after those things happened, I knew that I needed to develop a way, a set of skills or a mindset or something that would, if change and uncertainty was only going to continue, how could I identify these skills or pick up these abilities to be able to quickly adapt to situations of unknowns and sort of hack this innate system of ours that makes uncertainty and change so uncomfortable. And I condensed my findings into what I now call the art/science to thrive amidst uncertainty. Hashtag make change your BTCH. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on here, but now, we don't have time to go through everything today, and I really kind of want to focus it on you guys and kind of focusing it on managing personal change, but also how to lead your project teams or your project groups through change, through your communications. We're going to focus in on communications because change is such a big area, like project management is a huge area, but I'll give you the science behind it. And then I'll give you a framework that you can use to support your own project work from a communications point of view. And if you're interested in hearing more and learning more, you can link up with me. And so what I came to learn and appreciate is that change is inevitable, but it's not actually change itself that is the issue anyway. But the way in which we as humans experience and attach meaning to change. So like me and my spiraling because of the lack of control I felt, we experience discomfort and then we resist it, and it impacts our ability to pivot quickly, whether that's to threats or opportunities. And often this is as a result of a lurking fear. So fear paralyzes us, it demotivates us, and we're so full of self-doubt that it exhausts us completely. So I don't know if anyone's experiencing, like over the last 6 or 7 months, exhaustion. Your whole body has just been in this threat mode. I'll talk about that in a moment. But there's a reason for it. So change is scary because it brings on the surface these fears. So for me, it was the fear of losing control. But where does this come from? Many of the answers led me to understanding the neurological reasons why humans resist change in the first place. And on the very most basic level, your brain is actually working against you when it comes to change and uncertainty. What neuroscientists tell us is that our brains are wired to avoid it completely. And this is because it's evolutionary in nature, and it's basically part of our brain's inherent makeup from our hunter-gatherer days, because change and the unknown meant danger. Okay, so if we think from the context of our hunter-gatherer friends, change and then the unknown essentially meant being eaten by a lion. So the brain evolved to avoid it completely. And it's an old survival response, and whilst it is incredible response that has basically ensured our survival as a species, it's also a real pain when it comes to change, because your brain craves familiarity as if it requires it for its very survival. Anything unknown, new, anything new you want to get into, any new habit you want to create, any new job you want to get into, it's going to log it as too dangerous and scary. And what happens is it will begin to feed your mind with stories and insecurities and excuses to avoid it doing anything that it deems unsafe. So it traps you in your head by making you overthink. And this is where the fear comes in. So fear either stops us in our tracks from doing something that the brain perceives as dangerous, or actually it can transpire into resistance, right? So resistance either in ourselves or from those we lead. So not only is this innate survival response a big reason why we experience fear when things are changing and uncertain, but it's also the reason we experience those moments of self-doubt, that hesitation, and we overanalyze things to death. And something else that I discovered during my research was that it also reduces our cognitive functions. So it reduces our brain function. We essentially get dumber. And the reason for this is because when we're in high levels of uncertainty and ambiguity, our brain signals that we are at threat. Okay, it sees it as stress is in the same way, it sees that threat in the same way that it would being chased by a lion, and it prepares us for fight, flee, or freeze. So what happens is that when you feel at threat and your stress response is activated, the more emotional side of your brain, I call it the chimp, takes over the more rational side of your brain, so the executive brain. That's where all your problem solving is, or the kind of critical thought. It's officially called the Amygdala Hijack, but I like to call it the chimp takeover. So what happens is during the chimp takeover is out goes problem solving, out goes creativity, out goes your ability to make decisions. I've had clients who are just like, I'm just so confused, I'm in decision paralysis. And in comes panic, heightened emotions. We get easily confused, our heart rate can increase, and we become paralyzed by indecision. And we, some of the other reactions that we take, kind of short and sharp breaths. I don't know if anyone's been in a situation where you've done public speaking before, and your blood, your heart rate's increased, right? You tense up. That's because your body is going into threat mode. It's going, this is scary, and it's just fueling your muscles in order to run or fight. So this is a very, very similar response. So what is really worrying though is that when we don't manage this reaction, when we don't regulate this reaction, because this is going to happen whether you like it or not, right? It's our ability to then regulate it once we've got that threat signal. It's then to go, okay, is there a lion outside my cave? No. Okay, we can reduce that. We can reduce that stress signal. But the worrying thing is that if we allow it to, if we fuel it and we allow it to happen, we actually become very narrow-minded as well. And we completely miss opportunities that change presents. We won't even see the positive or the opportunity that change creates for us, because our brain isn't even looking for it. It's so consumed, it's so narrow-minded on the immediate threat. If you imagine, a hunter looking, very, very aware of something hunting it will become uber focused on that threat. And that's what happens. So it's desperately trying to get back a sense of familiarity and normality and comfort, that it's not even looking for the potential opportunities that change can bring. So what we need to do is limit the impact that these automatic responses have on us and our people. And we need to up our level of tolerance for uncertainty. And we can do that by giving our brain what it needs, a sense of safety, through control, choice, and certainty. Now, I hope you will have noticed that these things are often not in abundance during change, especially when the change is being enforced by leaders from elsewhere. So what we need to do is, and especially if you're not in control of the change, right? So if your leadership team is enforcing a change that you're just trying to manage, this can be a really, really difficult position to be in. So let's talk about ways that we can hack into our mainframe essentially and help others to do the same, to help our people do the same, to stop some of these adverse effects happening, which then create resistance. It's important to say here that not everyone is averse to change, right? If I said to you all, and not every circumstance is going to create this reaction, okay? If I said to you all, or even the most resistant employees, that I've transferred £1 million into your account, now this is likely to change people's lives like never before, but they're unlikely to be resistant. So it's not change itself, but the meaning that we attach to change. So we attach meaning that this must be bad because it's threatening my position or my competence or my status or my livelihood. And when I'm working with organizations, I like to use the Emotions Iceberg as an example of this to sort of describe what this looks like, because I think it illustrates perfectly the mistakes that most leaders and managers make when dealing with resistance to change. Because you've got all of those kind of resistant, let's batch them up as resistant behaviors on the top. And for you, this might look like procrastination, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, inner critic. And underneath are some of the really uncomfortable lurking fears that people may experience. And this is from my own experience, you know, fear of the unknown. When all that change was happening, what will happen? How will I cope? Will I be able to deal with this new situation? You know, am I going to be accepted into this new team that they're telling me that I'm suddenly part of? Fear of failure. Will I be able to do this? Will I be competent? I don't know that system. Fear of loss. What about the plan? You know, what about all the plans that we've created? What about all the work we've done? So naming the beast, right? Naming the emotion, for one, if you're going to do anything for yourself, naming how you're feeling and bringing a bit of awareness to what fears might be fueling that emotion, and helping others to do the same is probably one of the most fundamental ways we can manage change. And you can do that through coaching. Coaching is a really, really powerful tool for to do that, to coaching yourself or coaching others as a manager. And really sort of uncovering what is driving some of those behaviors that you're seeing on the top. Because if you're only ever plastering over the symptoms on the top, they will simply find new ways to appear. Right? But address the cause of your own and your people's fears, and you begin to alleviate that discomfort. And that's the space that we really, really kind of want to work in. So now we know what could be going on in our brains during change and why potentially some of that resistance occurs, and how we can counteract some of the negative impacts of that. Now, these are tough times for every manager and leader, whether you directly manage people or not. In some way, you're going to have to navigate the fear and the paranoia that will run wild as a result of uncertainty and insecurity, and what will likely mean a lot of change, whether that's your employees or your colleagues or your stakeholders or families even. It isn't the job that many of us signed up for. And I think many, you know, not everyone, especially some of the leaders that I've been confronted with, will not rise to the occasion. And sometimes we're in really, really tricky positions where we're, especially as managers, we're sort of stuck in this middle ground, and we know that things are not being managed well. But you being here suggests that you're invested in doing just that. And so I applaud you for that. And to finish up, I wanted to share with you just 2 of the big C's to energize change that I work with managers and leaders on when driving change initiatives. We can only cover 2 of them today, but these are probably some of the most important, and it's the ones where I think this tool could be most effective for you in your project work. So, communication. We all know, I know as project managers, that communication is fundamental, but it's even more so when we're talking about change, because communication is the simplest way to ensure that people feel that sense of control, certainty and choice. As I said before, the control, certainty and choice are the 3 things that we need to help our brain feel safe. And as I mentioned in the beginning, people will suffer less if they know what might be coming. Now, the mistakes many managers make is waiting until they have all the information and facts, because they don't want to be seen as not knowing or not having the answers. But in fact, we cope much better when information is staggered. It's far more important during change to cycle communication and repeat the same message often than to wait until the information is complete and perfect. And often I get the question, but what if we don't know something? That's your communication. Tell them that and say, we don't have all the information yet, but this is what we do know. And this is when we're going to update you the next time. And the other one is co-creation. Remember, going back to our brains need to feel control, choice and certainty to avoid it going into the chimp takeover. And what we do by co-creating as much as we can with people, with our project groups, project teams, the people that you lead, you allow them to be part of the changes. So giving your team the why and the what, and then let them do the how. And if you're in a situation where you're not getting the why from leaders, keep asking. That is one of the fundamental things that you should know and they should be able to give you during a period of change. So just keep asking the question, why are we implementing these changes? If they can't give you an answer, it's not a good enough change to implement, or they're not, they don't know the answer, you're not going to be able to get very far with that project. So the why is really, really important. So when thinking about the content of your communication, and this is leading on to the tool that I wanted to share with you today, there is a framework you can refer to and integrate into your communication plans that takes into consideration all of the things that we've just discussed around how we deal with change and what we need during periods of change. To avoid a lot of the resistance that we can feel in ourselves or those around us. Now, the model is from a change management methodology, Parasympathetic, and how they describe the difference between project management and change management is they talk around project management being about the process of moving the business from its current state to its future state. Whereas change management is taking consideration how people experience change and using that information to support individual employees impacted by change through their own transitions. So they make their own current state to future state. So PM is about the process of getting from the current state to future state, and change management is about supporting employees impacted by change to make their own transitions through that experience. Now, Parasympathetic show this process in a very linear way. In my mind, I always see it as sort of like this iterative process, right? It's not something that just stops. You start a change and then it stops. It's this constant process. And I think in this way, getting this into people's minds is a far more effective way of thinking about it. So as you can see here, in Parasy's model, they use PM to describe the process of change, and then change management just fits into project management as it exists. So project management, you would probably, project management would be about, enlisting a project group, making the case in the same way you'd make a business case for any other project, defining the vision, creating a plan, identifying action steps, and monitoring progress. So this process focus tends to be far more logical, and it emphasizes the change in the system or the structures or the process. Change management, on the other hand, will focus on people and the recognition that nothing really changes unless individual people change. Okay, so this is about influencing and including others, communicating a vision, listening and guiding them through their own transition. And that sometimes means guiding them through their own emotions through that change. And this will often, again, require far more coaching approach to management. So less of the telling, less of the bossing, less even of the delegating, and more of the kind of sort of asking questions and understanding where people are at. The people side of change is messier. There's no doubt about it. And it is more difficult to plan for. And it often can lead to changes in beliefs and behaviors, and can result in changes to organizational structures as well. One key recognition within change management is that when change is not led from a people perspective, you will get resistance to change. And it's often one of the top reasons that initiatives fail. So I'm going to skip some of these bits because I really, really want to get to the tool, which is by Parasympathetic, as I mentioned. And the premise behind this model is called ADKAR, and they've got loads of resources on this, so they've got lots of information that you can delve into. But it basically, ADKAR describes the phases that an individual will go through when faced with change. And you can use this model in so many ways, but with the time we have left, I'm just going to show you how you can use this to shape the content of your communications. So we'll run through each of what each of them means. So awareness. So making sure that people are aware of the need for change. And as you go through these, the way I'd like you to think about it is how this can just simply be incorporated. This model you just think about when you're building your communication plan, which you would be anyway, how you can ensure that these messages or these questions are answered in your communication plan. And this is how you can keep this nice and simple. You don't need a whole new spreadsheet workbook with lots of tabs. This is just when you're doing your communication plan, you'd go ADKAR. And you go, okay, let me make sure I've got some of that messaging in my communication plan. So the awareness for the need to change. People need to understand why it's changing. The next one is D, desire. They need to be personally invested to participate and support the change. Okay, so what's in it for me? What's in it for my team? It needs to be a choice that I'm making, because if you make me feel like I haven't got a choice and you're backing me into the corner, that's where I'm going to be resistant to it. Knowledge on how to change is K. So do I understand what you're asking me to do? Are you giving me training on what I need to know? Because if I feel incompetent, that's when I'm going to resist. The next one is ability. So ability to implement required skills and behaviors. Do I have what is needed? Now you've explained what I need. Do I have what is needed in order to implement that change? And reinforcement to sustain the change. So when you don't have one of these in place, this is essentially what can happen. So without awareness and desire in your communication, it's just going to be a lot of confusion and resistance. So employees will ask the same questions over and over again. You're going to get lower productivity and delays in implementation. Without knowledge and ability, you will see fear, anxiety, and frustration. So you're going to see lower utilization or incorrect usage, a lot of worry, and probably a reduction in productivity. And without reinforcement, you're going to see a lot of backsliding. So reinforcement, the biggest one is celebrating those small wins and reinforcing the new behaviors or the new actions that you want to see. But if there's none of that, then you'll probably begin to see employees revert back to old ways of doing things. What I do have is this in a document for you. So you can take away and you can practice using it. I've got this worksheet, so I'll share it in the comments in just a moment. But one thing I did want to say is you just to remember that you don't need long-winded change processes and documentations to implement this. It's just a case of referring to this framework and integrating that into your communication plans, especially if we're talking about minor changes, like, I don't know, like a software update or, moving a button, right? You're not going to need an entire workbook to instigate that change. Now, I realize I've gone well over, Elizabeth. So sorry. If we had time, I would go through an example with you, but I think we're running short. So if I just share that worksheet.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Dad recycling. Well, how to recycle your dad.
Exactly. It was a big change. I had to get my family up on board. No, it was trying to get my dad to recycle was was a change management process in itself.
Brilliant.
There's the worksheet.
Whew. Oh, thank you. I see that link in the down there in the chat. So I'll grab that and I'll send it out to the people who weren't able to join us live as well. Thank you, Jay. That was so interesting. And I know when you're talking, it's quite hard to follow the comments as well, but people have been saying that, they've taken away things from it. So Laura had a comment about it not being our job, but actually we just have to do it because project management is a lot about leading the people, and it might not be something you signed up for because the project management part is really the process, but you have to do what you have to do for the benefit of the project. Amanda said about the gap model, how good that was as well. I thought that was, because I'm aware of the ADKAR model, but the gaps, that makes it really clear, doesn't it, to see if a piece is missing, what likely behaviour you're likely to get.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in the worksheet that I've sent around, there's instructions on how you can almost analyze using a scale of 1 to 5, right? Where somebody is at, or where a team is at, or where an organization is at. So awareness, out of 1 to 5, how aware do you think they are? And then you can use that diagnostic tool to work out where you need to focus your attention first.
Brilliant.
So yeah, great.
Thank you. I know that we've targeted that we might be about half an hour and some time for questions. So I do feel like if you need to go, just go, because I know you've all got busy days. But does anyone have any questions for Jay? Perhaps, Jay, if you're all right to stay for another 5 or 10 minutes.
Certainly. Yes, absolutely.
Lucy's taken her
I thought it was an awesome presentation. Thank you very much. That's brilliant. It took a lot away. Just sort of one question. When you said where change has to be through the whole organisation, and and I get that completely, but the level of soft skills throughout the organisation that will be required, at each level, it feels like from where quite a step change. I don't know if you have any viewpoint on that. I'm not saying it's not the right model to go to, but where we are today, maybe in some companies, and where they need to get to have change, people that can deliver that at every level.
Oh yeah, this isn't an easy mission that I've picked for myself. It definitely is not. And some people will not certainly kind of see the value in it. But I really, really believe the way that we're moving, if we don't have this capability, not only are people going to struggle personally, but those they're leading are really, really going to struggle. And we've seen the impact that can have, on a societal level. Those mental health statistics do not lie. And so, yeah, it's not an easy mission.
No. But it would work, and we've got to get it. And just one other question I had, I'll give other people some time, is I've sort of dealt with some difficult change projects. I've sort of been sat with 8 or 9 chimps or whatever going off and going through it. And I feel that sometimes it's absolutely exhausting, not like that you're being bullied yourself or anything like that, but absolutely exhausting to the people management side of it, to turn those people, to coach them, to get them, psych them up, to go with it, to do that. Like the whole project, it takes an awful lot out of you. And I wondered if there's any tricks where it can not quite take so much out of you. Or is that the only way to do it, to go for it like that with people like that?
Absolutely. A large portion of my work is about actually less of the hard skills of change and the change management stuff, but more so around how do you protect your own well-being, your own energy, because you're dealing with so much emotion from other people whilst managing it yourself. It is exhausting. That's why we're seeing these burnout statistics. That's why we're seeing this heightened stress and overwhelm. So one of the things that I always, and this is related to the stress response and the chimp takeover and how you can manage that. We can't control other people, for one, right? We can't control what they do, how they respond, how they react. We can only control what we do, how we maintain ourselves, and then what we do with that person to sort of support them. So that's the first thing. But I always talk about having a calm practice, and that's about reducing your stress response to make sure you're coming from a place, so you're regulating your emotions, your stress response, so you're not being triggered into that high anxiety, high stress state because of what you're experiencing, what you're having to deal with around you. And a calm practice can be anything from, understanding, it takes sort of understanding how your body deals with stress, but essentially you need an outlet for stress. So stress is just an emotion, okay? It's a feeling. We physically feel it. That's why it's called feelings. It happens in your body. So you need to exert that. You need a way physically of dealing with that stress. So people do that in different ways, but there are things like physical exercise, any kind of movement of your body, running, walking, anything. Things like a lot of neuroscience has actually shown the impact of like laughing, crying, creative outlet, anything that is going to that calm practice, prayer even, prayer or breathing techniques, any of that is triggers something called the parasympathetic nervous system, I think that's what it's called. And that's basically your internal, like an internal fan that a computer has. That's essentially that system. So by integrating a calm practice like breathing techniques, or exerting energy in doing exercise and stuff, will trigger that system, and will kind of calm you down in the same way that it will stop the machine from blowing up. So really it's about managing your own stress response, and then helping other people to manage their stress response. They're reacting in that way because they're being triggered, fear triggered in some way. And that's where you've got the iceberg. They may be angry, they may be showing these really kind of adverse emotions, but it's probably coming from something where they fear incompetence, or it might be fear of what they're going to lose. And it's really, you would sort of want to be dealing with that stuff, like what is it that is really triggering that stuff above the surface? And you're only going to get that through asking questions.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry, Jay, can I just add to Lucinda's as well? So it's Laura. It's just finding what Lucinda's saying there. I find that people, when you're trying to do change, they just make it another outlet. So they go, oh, you're now the project manager that's involved. Nobody's listened to me before, so now I'm gonna put all my negativity to you, and it's your problem. And then they burn you out with it, and you think, I'm trying to make change, but I'm not getting anywhere. So then I'm now up against it as well. So I do think that's really important. People kind of go, oh, you're a new person that can deal with this. I'm just going to be negative to you. And it's hard going, isn't it, to then battle through. But
it's so hard, and you've so got to look after yourself. But also, you make a really great point, Laura, that generally when we understand human behavior and what we're looking for, I won't go too far into it, but essentially it's belonging. We want to be seen, we want to be heard, right? That's it on its most basic level. Now, when we don't feel like we're being seen or heard, or we haven't been listened to, what do? We react badly, right? Like a child overreacting is what happens, is that way we were built. So giving people that outlet, and I know it's not nice, and it's really hard to sit there, and especially when it's not anything to do with you, but we went through actually really, I was supporting a leader through a period of change, and there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of frustration. I could tell that it was going to be a hard project to work on unless we gave them this outlet. We sat them down and they had it out, and we did several of these. It wasn't just one, but they needed to be heard, they needed to be listened to, they needed that opportunity to just get it out. And so as hard as it is sometimes that's the best solution. And you've got to listen and take what they've said and make sure that they feel heard for this to work. But that is a really, really great strategy.
Taking the time to build that into your plan, that you're going to do it. Yeah. Being proactive.
Yeah.
We're learning a lot of that, aren't we, Elizabeth? That you actually just have to be proactive in all of this. And that's the answer.
It is. It's taking the initiative when nobody else will, and doing what you need to do to get through.
Yeah.
And if that means letting people vent at you for half an hour and then you go off and have a cup of coffee and de-stress, go for a run at lunchtime, then at the end of the day, it all moves the business forward and everybody feels heard, and you've broken down some of those barriers that Jay was talking about, and helping people through their own personal transition to the new world.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
All right, we're coming up to the top of the hour. I can't believe how quickly that time has gone. It's been so fascinating. Thank you.
It was amazing. Really lovely to join you all. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for inviting me.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. So we will we do meet again before Christmas. I'm not actually sure that we do. I should have checked that before I came on the call. Anyway, I'll email you next week or Monday and let you know what's going on. I think we might have office hours before the end of the month. No, we don't. But I'm available on email, and you can box me as well. So if there's anything that comes up while we're taking a little bit of a hiatus for Christmas, then by all means do just get in touch, and then we can pick up our live calls and training and things again in January, and I will share the calendar with you. I'll put that together today, so we've got some good stuff happening in the new year. And also today's video, I will send out the link with Jay's spreadsheet and also the recording. So, and I'll send that to you, Jay, as well. So you've got, in case you want to use that for something. And then we can, if you want to look back over this material, then it's there for you to have another quick look through. Because I saw some people taking notes, but I know Rudy's already said to me, is it possible to watch it again? And yes, it will be. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you,
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.